Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Hadith Disciple Critical Book Review. The work that we have with us today is called Criticism of Hadith Among Muslims with reference to Sunan Ibn Majah. Criticism of Hadith among Muslims with reference to Sunan Ibn Majah. The author says Suhaib Hassan Abdul Ghaffar. Suhaib Hassan Abdul Ghaffar. The book is printed by joint publication. It says Taha Publishers Limited, London. And then it says here Al-Quran Society, which is also in London. The book was printed, it says 1407 of Muharram, October 1986. October 1986. This here is a very interesting book, a very beneficial book, a very worthy read. It's worth your time, worth your energy. And alhamdulillah, hopefully it'll be a useful addition to the Islamic library, a useful addition to the English library, and also a useful addition to the Hadith Renaissance and the Hadith culture, the Hadith movement. Khairan inshallah. On the back of the book it says about the author, Suhaib Hassan Abdul Ghaffar was born in Malekota, India. Brought up and educated in Pakistan. After completing Islamic and Arabic studies, Fadil Arabic 1960 and English language studies BA 1962, he joined the newly set up Islamic University at Medina, Saudi Arabia for higher studies in the faculty of Sharia, where a galaxy of prominent scholars such as Sheikh Muhammad Amin al-Shanqiti, Muhammad Nasruddin al-Albani, Abdul Qadir, Shaybatul Hamd, Muhammad al-Majdub, and later his father Abdul Ghaffar Hassan, under the able guidance of Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz, were among the teaching staff. After graduating in 1966, he began his career as a teacher and worked in Islamic Dawah at Nairobi, Kenya on behalf of Darul Iftah. Later he moved in 1976 to London. Since then he has been engaged in Islamic Dawah, especially through the Forum of Al-Quran Society. His published work includes a series of lessons on the teachings of the Quran and Hadith, a treatise refuting Qadiyanat, an Arabic rendering of two Urdu books entitled Al-Istikhariyya wal-Islam. He says Al-Ishtirakiyyati wal-Islam, and ماذا يجب على المسلمين تجاه القرآن by Mas'ud Alam, Nadwi, and Dr. Israr Ahmed, respectively. Excuse me for if I mispronounce anyone's name or any of the titles. That's the excerpt from the back of the book. The book is approximately 248 pages. There is a preface, then there is a dedication, then there is an acknowledgement, then there are the contents, the table of contents. He says part 1, chapter 1, Hadith, its origin and the sources of fabrication. Chapter 2, the period of the Prophet. Chapter 3, the period of the companions, 1st century AH. Chapter 4, the period of the successors till the middle of the 2nd century. Chapter 5, period extending to 250 AH. Chapter 6, the period of 6 canonical traditionists. And then he says part 2, Ibn Majah. And then he says Hadith number 1, Hadith number 2, Hadith number 3, Hadith number 4, Hadith number 5, until the 10th and final Hadith, conclusion and bibliography. Conclusion and bibliography. In general, the book is very beneficial. As we said, it's worth your time, it's worth your efforts. Oftentimes you're going to enjoy it. Many parts of the book, alhamdulillah, are sweet, nice. Something is very pleasurable, very beneficial, very educational, very scientific. So let's get started with the pros of the book. After we said that it has we have a good view of the book in general, as a whole, overall. Pro number 1, the book deals with a specific topic. Often books, the titles are very general, very broad, but this is finely tuned. Criticism of Hadith. Naqd al-Hadith among Muslims, not among non-Muslims, the Orientalists, among Muslim scholars, Muslim researchers, and specifically with reference to Ibn Majah. And we're going to get into that part as well. Number 2, the book deals with one of the 6 books of Hadith, Ibn Majah. Number 3, the book is full of academia. It's considered to be an academic work, alhamdulillah. Number 4, the author mentions classical and contemporary sources. And we mentioned this before in other book reviews. Whenever you can blend two schools, two styles, the East and the West, the old and the new, sweet and sour, when you can put those together, it's going to be a very good taste. And something that everybody can enjoy when they eat, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not too old, It's not too new. It's not forgetting the past, nor is it totally neglecting the advancements in the modern age. Number 5, the book has a detailed bibliography, very easy to research, to read, and to go back to his sources, very detailed. Number 6, the book is full of examples and specimens. Whenever there's more examples, it's easier to understand. You get the point, and it's like you're putting layers of paint on the wall. First coat, second coat, third coat, you're coating it, you're glossing it. It makes it simple and easy when there's example after example. Number 7, the book focuses heavily on the Orientalists, those who weren't the first to criticize the Hadith, to make up lies and inaccuracies, but they were from the first with regards to the modern world, the Western world. The founding fathers of some of these universities and institutions in Eastern Europe and in Western Europe, let alone Canada and America, came from the Orientalists. Those who came from the West, they went to the Orient, the land of the rising sun, whether it's Japan or China, Vietnam, whether it was Egypt, whether it was Morocco, wherever they went in the Orient, in the East, the place in which the sun rises, all right? And the Orientalists, they didn't just study Islam, they studied all things of the East. They studied different languages, different cultures. They studied the arts of the East. But many of the Orientalists, they took a very special liking to the study of Islam, to the Arabic language, to the Quran, and many of them, they took a keen interest in the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And that isn't nothing that's strange. Hadith is going to be very interesting. We spoke about the Orientalists before. Their founding forefather, Goldziher, his devoted pupil, Joseph Schat from Germany, and the rest of them who came after them, and most of them totally blind. They followed the first Goldziher without any type of critical assessment of what he said. And they accepted his theories as if they were revelation. So Goldziher is considered to be the George Washington of the Orientalists. He is the Ben Franklin. He's one of the founding fathers, and they accepted his theories, most of them, if not all of them, specifically most of them, wholeheartedly without any type of academic criticism. And that's terribly unfortunate. And we don't have time to discuss that anymore. Moving forward, point 8, the book discusses the problem of hadith fabrication. What is a big problem? It was a problem then, and it's a problem now. How often is Islam attacked? And you look at the hadith and it's totally false and bogus. How often is someone's life taken? A woman is killed. People are blown up. Someone kills themselves because of a bogus, fake, phony hadith. Number 9, good detailed information about the author. We have good information about the author. We find many books, some books that we reviewed, we don't know who the author is. Whether it's an original work in English or whether it's a translation. Who is the author? Where did he come from? Where did he study? What are his qualifications? We don't know anything about him. Number 10, the book deals with counter fabrication. How some people made up hadiths to support their views, whether they were dogmatic views, theological views, philosophical views, political views. All right, and then there were another group came and they countered them with the opposite. Since you made up a hadith about Ali, we're going to fabricate hadiths about Abu Bakr and Umar. Since you made up a hadith about affirming the qadr, we're going to make up hadiths rejecting the qadr. And that's a problem. Last but not least, the 11th pro of the book is that it contains illustrative charts. Several places in which the author illustrates and he draws out the asanid and the mutun. That's very beneficial and it's very easy for a person to understand. Let's get to the cons of the book. The cons, the errors, the mistakes of the book. Number 1 is a misleading and or unclear title. The title is a bit misleading. It says criticism of hadith among Muslims with reference to Ibn Majah. The first thing that I understood is that the hadith is talking about criticizing, or the book is talking about criticizing hadiths in Ibn Majah. That's the entire topic of the book. It's talking about hadith criticism in Sunan Ibn Majah. And that's not what the book is about. That's a part of the book, but that's not what the book is about at all. In Arabic, listen carefully. It says, نقد الحديث لدى المسلمين مع دراسة موضوعات ابن ماجه. It's much clearer in Arabic. It says, نقد الحديث لدى المسلمين. Hadith criticism among the Muslims. Then it says, مع. It says, along with دراسة موضوعات ابن ماجه, a study of hadiths that are considered fabricated, or some considered fabricated from Ibn Majah. So in English it says, with reference. See that right there? There's no comma, there's no space, there's no separate line. So we understand it as one solid concept. In actuality, it should be criticism of hadith among Muslims. Pause. Stop the tape. Hit the return button. Move it down, move it out the way, with reference or along with reference to the Sunan of Ibn Majah and the fabricated hadiths. So the title is incomplete, it's vague, and it is misleading. Number 2 is a lack of glossary of used terms, Arabic terms, so on and so forth. There are several words that are in Arabic that have been transliterated, and there's no glossary of them. What does this word mean? Number 3 is occasional robotic writing style, especially in translation. Oftentimes, we find many books, the writing style is stiff and it's mechanical. It's not fluid, it's not smooth, and it leaves the reader to sit and have choppy sentences. Number 4, lack of consistency regarding citation of hadiths in Arabic before translation. Sometimes he quotes the hadith in Arabic, and other times he just puts it in English. And we know in the academic world, you should stick to one methodology. Either quote all of the hadiths in Arabic first, or bring them just in their translated forms. Number 5, lack of consistency in mentioning dates and deaths. Sometimes he mentions when Hassan al-Basri died, when Zuhri died, when Imam Ibn Ma'in died, and oftentimes he mentions a personality and he doesn't say when they died. So that's inconsistent. Number 7, leaving the reader in the dark in some places. He mentions concepts as if they're well known, as if they're understood, and it's the total opposite. Number 8, then later on rectifying those dark spots, i.e. delaying things that should have been put forth earlier. On page 20, he'll mention something that's totally vague, and then on page 190, he'll explain it without saying that he's going to deal with it on page 190. The 9th count of the book is that there are several hadiths that were left untranslated. So now, bid'Allah ta'ala, let's get into the notable quotes. And alhamdulillah, there are several notable quotes. Let's start off with page 31. The author says, he says here, chapter 1, Hadith, its origin and the sources of fabrication. As this paper is related to Hadith and Sunnah, it will be most appropriate to explain these two terms according to the traditionists. Very important quote is that if we're talking about heart surgery, then we should deal with the definition, the conceptualization of everything according to heart surgeons, not people that deal with the skin and the bones and a brain surgeon, no matter how smart and intelligent and skilled they are, but they are not heart surgeons. So when we talk about hadith, sunnah, what does a hadith mean? What does sunnah mean? Is it sahih? Is it da'if? Who is this? Who's that? We can't go to a Christian scholar. We can't go to a faqih in Islam. We can't go to an Orientalist. We have to go to the muhaddithin, ahl hadith. Then we have on page 34 another notable quote. There are many. Obviously, we're not going to have time to read all of them, but I want to share all of them with you guys. It says, Muslim sources admit that a lot of spurious hadiths found their way into hadith literature. In fact, the science of hadith, known to be mustalah or ilm al-hadith or ilm usul al-hadith, developed to distinguish between the authentic hadith and the fabricated ones. The traditionists have dealt with each hadith as an independent case. They dealt with each hadith as an independent case, separately. Traditionists have dealt with each hadith as an independent case, subjecting both its isnad and metin to a severe test according to the principles laid down in this science. This is how separate collections of authentic hadith and those fabricated ones came into being. The scholars of hadith, they dealt with hadith, every hadith specifically as one specific narration, not looking at the other reports. Oh, it's authentic because it sounds okay. It's authentic because there are other. No. They dealt with each hadith specifically. And they didn't just criticize the isnad, but they also criticized, as we have explained countless times, the metin, the text of the hadith. That the scholars of hadith, they criticize the mutun. And oftentimes they criticize the mutun without the isnad. And the idea that the scholars of hadith, as we've heard several times, al-hadith, al-muhadithun, hum as-sayadila, the scholars of hadith are the pharmacists, wal-fuqaha hum al-atibba, and the scholars of fiqh are the doctors. That's erroneous. That's false. Rather, the al-hadith, you read Sahih Bukhari and you'll see who's a faqih. You read the Jami' of Imam al-Tirmidhi and you see who's faqih. You listen to the different statements of the ulama, Abu Dawud, rahimahullah, how he organized his book, how he put it together, you see who's a faqih. You hear the questions they asked Imam Ahmed, and you see who's a faqih. So Ahl Hadith, from among them without a doubt, are fuqaha. Fuqaha that were far superior than the fuqaha that were naked from the hadith, that were barren. Alright, that's a long discussion in itself. What's important is is to say that the scholars of hadith were just pharmacists. They were just donkeys that bore scrolls on their backs. They didn't understand what they reported. The only thing that they knew was fulan, alan, hadathana, akhbara, and that's it. If it's a kadhab, then a hadith al-mawdu'. If it's a thiqa, hadith sahih. If it's a saduq, hadith hasan. Abadan. That's not the way of Ahl al-Hadith. Not of past nor of present. The true Ahl al-Hadith. Rather, they looked into the content. They criticized the content. And the founding fathers of hadith criticism, the Sahaba, how many times did they criticize a report? And they knew that another companion narrated it. I know that Umar is not a liar. I know that Hudayfa is not a liar, but he made a mistake. The Prophet never said those words. Whether Aisha radiallahu anha was correct or incorrect. How many Sahaba did she criticize that were greater than her, more knowledgeable than her, more learned than her? But when she heard something that she felt was wrong, she rejected it, even if it was a trustworthy reporter. So that is false to say that the people of hadith only criticize the sanad and they never criticize the isnad. Moving forward, we have another quote on page 39. Perhaps we'll skip page 45. The author, he says here, he says, Qadariyya, a theological faction which believes that Allah has no command over the actions of human beings and that they are not hindered in any way by the predestination ordained by Allah. Ma'bad al-Juhani and Ghaylan al-Thaqafi were regarded as the flag bearers of this doctrine. Mu'tazila, because of their similar ideas, are known as Qadariyya as well. And then he says Mu'tazila. Wasid ibn Attar became known with this title when he separated from Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. That's not necessarily accurate 100%. Al-Muhim, what's important is that he's defining the different sects, the different schisms in Islam, and how they strayed from the original way, and how there were different debates and fights among them with regards to hadith narrations, hadith acceptance, and rejection as well. Page 72. The author, he says, he says here, he says, it is quite believable that a person after a long association with the Prophet would have known the general way of the Prophet's speech. He would have developed such understanding as to differentiate between the sayings of the Prophet and that of an impostor, like a money changer, who needs to detect a true coin from a false one. Ka'b ibn Malik died 50 AH, 670 AD, was very familiar with the sayings of the Prophet and was able to isolate the true hadith from the fabricated one. Even an ordinary person experiences this sort of thing in his daily life regarding his closest friends. One often is witnessed to be proclaiming if anything unfamiliar is reported about a friend. No, he is not the sort of person to do or say so and so. In other words, the scholars of hadith, they read so many authentic hadiths, they lived with the Prophet so much, they read and studied so much of his seerah, they memorized so much of his life, that the moment something sounded funny or it was fishy, instantly they would know the Prophet never said this. Munkar, la, wahm, khata, there's a mistake. But fulan, thiqa, fulan, la, abadan. The Prophet never said that because they had so much experience what he actually did say. So just think about your father, your wife, your husband, your best friend, all right? Your closest friend. You're with your close friend all of the time. They tell you secrets. When they're depressed, when they're down, when they're sad, they come to you. When he's having a problem, a dispute, or argument with his wife, he calls you at 1 o'clock at night. You know things about this close personal friend that no one else knows. You guys drink coffee together. You eat things together. You travel together. You have a pretty good idea about this person's personality. So a stranger or someone that doesn't have such an intimate relationship, they bring you a report. And the report sounds funny. It feels funny. And your skin is tingling. And you say, wait a second. Abdullah, he doesn't talk like that. He never said that. I don't believe that. No, trust me, he said it. Fulan saw it. I don't believe it. Because I've been with Abdullah. I've been with this guy, Ahmed, Abdurrahman. I've been with these brothers for years. I've traveled with them. I know things about them. There's no way that he would say that. So this is a very important technique of hadith criticism. Is to know that which is authentic in abundance with long experience. And instantly recognizing that which is counterfeit. Such as he says, the money changer, the sayrafi, a gold coin, a silver coin. This is fake, it's false. You can look at it, the details of it, and the list goes on. Moving forward, there's also another notable quote on page 73, and there are many of them that will suffice ourselves with the notable quotes for now. Now let's get into the specific sins of the book. We mentioned the cons in general. Now let's get into examples of specific akhta, specific mistakes. Starting off on page 14, the author, he says, Isnad. He says, Isnad is the most important part of a hadith, as it is the bridge leading to the hadith itself. The most important part of the hadith, or the important part of the hadith? An integral part of the hadith, but the most important, or the actual text, the matan being the most important. He says, that is why the Isnad had been the major point of discussion among the traditionists. He just contradicted himself. He said that they criticized the text, they looked into the wording, so on and so forth, and then he's saying that's the major discussion, it was just the Isnad. That is not true. He then says, for the beginning of an Isnad, great deal of difference is found among the opinions held by the Western scholars. James Robson, a famous Scottish Orientalist, he says, he summarizes his predecessors' opinions according to his statement, and then he quotes other Orientalists. Page number 43. The author, he says, as mentioned at the beginning of this chapter, this onslaught of spurious hadith was challenged in different ways, including questioning about Isnad, criticism of reporters, and referring back in most disputed cases to the original sources. Once again, the scholars of hadith only criticized the Isnad. That's all they went back to was the reporters. They never ever looked at the actual wording, the statement. Ana Madinatu Ilm, I'm a city of knowledge, and Ali is its gate. Does that make sense? Was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq not the gate to the Prophet's knowledge? Aisha, his wife, Ibn Abbas, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, who were the 7 prolific narrators of hadith, none of them were Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Well, no disrespect to Ali. He was from among the most of the Sahaba, after those 7, from the 4 Khulafa, he had the most hadith. But he wasn't a prolific narrator, he wasn't a mukthir, he didn't report over 1,000. So would it make sense for the Prophet to say, I'm a city of knowledge and Ali is his gate? That doesn't sound right. So he's saying basically they just looked at the chain. If the chain looked good, they would accept it. If the chain was bad, they would reject it. And we've said and proven and explained that that is scientifically inaccurate. Page 66. The author, he says here, Tirmidhi with his isnad back to Asma ibn al-Hakam al-Fazari, who said, I heard Ali as saying, I was a person who benefited from the hadith of the Prophet whenever I happened to hear them from him as much as Allah wanted me to benefit out of it. But if someone among his companions narrated hadith to me, I asked him to take an oath. If he did so, I held him as true. As this is the only narration of Ali, died 40 after the Hijrah, 660 after Common Era, is reported to have mentioned his practice of asking the companions an oath, etc. Is that authentic? Did Ali say those words? Some investigation needs to be done regarding that report. Page number 71. The author, he says, there are not too many occasions where the reference is given to any writing in the period of the companions. He says there are not too many occasions in which there's reference given to documentation of hadith during the time of the companions. That is scientifically inaccurate as well. As many of the great researchers of this time have proven, there were countless scrolls, memorandums, books, pamphlets, notes of hadiths that were recorded during the Prophet's lifetime, alayhi salatu wassalam. The next specific error is on page 90. The author, he says here, Ali ibn Abdullah al-Madini, then he says, he says here, he says, during this period, political as well as theoretical factions were founded. Shia elements was busy struggling hard to restore the caliphate to the descendants of Ali. Khawarij remained in conflict with the Umayyads. Though they were beaten politically, the sect survived as a religious group based on certain ideas. And then he goes on to quote the Mu'tazila. On the other hand, became well known particularly with the state supporting during Abbasids because of the different opinions on the attributes of Allah. Every faction tried to support its views by the sayings of the Prophet. That's not true. Some of these groups, such as the Khawarij themselves, the Mu'tazila themselves, would reject the hadith. They wouldn't use the hadith. They would not narrate the hadith. And they held the people of hadith in total contempt. Rather, they would support their views with the Quran. Oftentimes, they would report their views with the aql, with their intellect, and their human reasoning. So that is totally inaccurate. He then says, moving forward, he says, therefore, this led to the emergence of fabricated hadith, which caught the attention of the traditionists who in their turn had left a rich material consistent authenticating and disparaging remarks in order to check the authenticity out on isnad. Once again, the author is stuck. He's trapped on criticism of isnad and not criticism of metin. That is unfortunate, especially when you talk about the old times. One could possibly say, in the past, the criticism of the metin was more than the criticism of the isnad. Moving forward, page 124, page 125, and also page 201. Perhaps we'll mention that as the last one. There are many other errors, specific errors. Page 201, the author, he says here, the three traditionists, Shafi'i, Ibn Uqda, and Ibn Adi, seem to be in favor, while a host of other traditionists have disparaged him. Shafi'i remarks hold no water if judged according to the explanation given by Ibn Hibban. Dhahabi has rightly said that the disparaging remarks should be given preference, especially when the cause of such remarks have been given in detail. But it will be more wise to accept this hadith as musahaf or mu'allal, as held by Ahmad ibn Hanbal, than to reject it completely owing to the disparaging remarks made against Ibrahim ibn Muhammad, because he himself has reported to have pointed out this fact. What's wrong with that? Isn't musahaf mu'allal? How do you know something is musahaf? Unless you've gathered the turuq. إِذَا جَمَعْتَ الطُّرُقْ. You've gathered the reports, you've looked to them, and ضَرَبْتَ بَعْضَهَا بِبَعْضٍ. You've compared them with each other, thrown them against each other. Then he says here, is that just because it is musahaf or mu'allal doesn't mean that it is to be completely rejected. If it is mu'allal, is it maqbool or mardud? If we declare it to be mu'allal, then obviously it's missing one of the conditions of Sahih Hadith. And if it's not Sahih, then it is rejected. Whether it's mawdu', whether it's da'if, al-muhim, ghayru maqbool. It is unacceptable. What is the faida of us saying that we don't accept it? It's clearly wrong, it's an error, but don't totally reject it. Alright, so these are some of the theoretical different errors with regards to impractical errors in the book. And some of them are not, many of them are not typos. That's actual khata ilmi, something that the author thinks and feels how he was trained and how he was taught in that. Khair inshallah. Al-muhim, the book is a very beneficial work. These are some of the pictures of the illustrative charts, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's mention them. Maybe you can see that there. Okay. The author, he gives the different takharij, the takhrij of the hadiths with their charts. Very useful, very beneficial for the reader. And basically, the author, he talks about this being his thesis for his masters. And he dealt with the first part, which was hadith criticism. And then the second part was taking 10 hadiths from the Sunan of Ibn Majah and discussing those ulama who consider them to be mawdu' or not. Suyuti defended Ibn Majah, Ibn Jawzi, etc. That's what the book is about. So bi'idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you get a chance in your local bookstore, if you order online, it's an older book, as you can see. It even smells old, looks old. Criticism of hadith among Muslims with reference to Ibn Majah. The grade that we give the author, alhamdulillah, we give him 4 quills out of 5. 4 out of 5 quills is a very good grade. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for watching and tuning in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.